Hi everybody, it's Emma back in the watershed. I'm in my dye studio this afternoon, and I'm going to do the first session of the sock knitting online workshop. So let's just recap. If you saw the first one, which was all about getting our hank of yarn into our ball, here is the nicely produced ball of wool that I had to redo. I've taken the centre out from the middle there, so it sits really nicely and won't move around while I'm knitting, which is quite useful. Okay, so I've got my yarn ready and that's good to go. I also mentioned in the last video about the knitting needles. So I knit socks on 5 wooden double pointed knitting needles that are 20 centimetres, let me just double check that, yep, 20 centimetres long. There are other needles that you can get out there, which obviously are metal ones if you prefer, or bamboo or whatever, but there are also different lengths and different sizes. So these are 20 centimetres long and they are 2.75 millimetre needles, double pointed. You can actually get sock needles that are much smaller, which are about 15 centimetres long if you prefer. I work on the longer ones, which has its downfalls in some ways, but the reason I choose the long ones is that I am more comfortable that I'm not going to lose any stitches off the end. I've got a friend Paula who knits lots and lots of socks, and she always works on the smaller needle, and she actually works with 4 needles, stitches on 3 and knits with the 4th. I knit socks on 5 needles, so my stitches are on 4 and I use the other one to knit with. So the reason that I use 5 needles rather than 4 is because sock knitting is knitted in multiples of 4. So for a standard size sock, which is about a size 5, 4 to 6 size, UK size foot, the standard simple pattern is 60 stitches, which is divisible by 4, so that you've got 15 stitches that will go on each needle. Obviously if you're working on 3 needles, that would be 20 on each needle, but for this tutorial I'm going to work on the basis that we are going to be using 5 needles. The reason is that I feel that the way that the sock pattern works, it is a lot simpler to understand. But again, I think with all things, as I mentioned before, you find your own way through it. I think the reason that Paula uses the smaller needles and less needles is that actually it is probably quicker, because you've got less needles to change, you can whiz around quicker. But I find that trying to understand sock knitting, it is easier with 5 needles. So the 1 needle you're using to knit onto, and the stitches remain on 4 needles. Okay. The other thing that you are going to need is some stitch markers. I actually don't use them anymore. I know, I knit so many socks now, I don't need them, but they are really, really helpful. You can actually use a bit of wool to make, if you haven't got actually any markers specifically, you can use a bit of wool. I actually use these things, which are more for jewellery making. They're tiny little silver metal round things. They work perfectly well. You could also use a safety pin. They work just as well. You don't need anything fancy, and you can use a bit of wool if you haven't got that, but it will be useful to have those to do this. Okay, the other thing that I always find really useful is to have a crochet hook handy, a fine one, so that if you drop a stitch, it is actually easier to pick it up with a crochet hook. And this one here, it's a little tiny old one, so I'm just trying to read what it is. It says 2.5 millimetres. That's a 2.5 millimetre crochet hook. 5 2.75 millimetre double pointed needles. These are 20 centimetres long, and some stitch markers. If you haven't got a stitch marker, the safety pin works beautifully as well. Okay, So the first thing we're going to do is cast off, and I reckon the hardest part of sock knitting is actually that first couple of rows and getting that going. So first of all, we're going to cast on. So use your usual, create a loop round your finger, push the thread up through the loop to create another loop, and you've got your loop to cast on. I'm going to pop that onto one needle, and I'm going to cast on. So we're going to work a pair of socks to fit a size, I think comfortably, a size 5 or 6, so they fit me. So I'm going to cast on, and you'll need 60 stitches. If you'd like a sock pattern, I've got a very, very basic sock pattern that I use all the time. Please email me at emma@inthewoolshed.com, and I will make sure that you get a copy of a pattern. Mine's stuck in my little, here I've got a little bag that I carry all my sock knitting. Mine is stuffed in the bottom there. A little bit scrunched up now from lots of use, but I will send you a copy by email if you would like that. So just email, that is emma@inthewoolshed.com. Okay. And by the way, I'll send it for free. Okay, so I'm going to cast on. Now, you want the casting on to be relatively loose, okay? So, because when you put your foot into the sock, you don't want it to be super tight at that top, which can happen. So I always use the method of casting on, and you'll have your own methods for casting on, where I don't go through the stitch, I go through the side of it. So I'm going to cast on 60 stitches. It's gone nice and quiet. I think someone was mowing the lawn outside. So I'm in the dye studio, which is based on my sister's farm. My sister and her husband, they're farmers, sheep farmers, which is how all this really began. And they've got a container which is where I keep all my stock lovely and dry. And this is an old grain store that I'm really lucky is my dye studio. And there is another room to the side of it as well, which is where I've got a big floor loom waiting for me to have time to do. But right now, I've just been working this morning. You can see some pots behind me, which is where all my dyes are, and I've just been doing some mordanting this morning. I thought I would use the time. The sun's coming through the window beautifully to get this video done. So, casting on 60 stitches. Relatively, not super loose, but because obviously it'll just fall off your needle. But you might hear some twitter of birds. I've got birds nesting in the eaves, and I spotted a swallow this morning, so they're back. They come and nest in the barn where I am, and I absolutely love them. I love them when they come, because obviously it's that sign of summer's on its way. But they do make a bit of a mess, which is really sad. But I've got them. They were nesting in this actual room before I took over, and I've got about 4 or 5 nests just outside the door. There's a bit of a sort of a veranda part, and they're in there. I do love them, and by the end of the summer they get more confident with me, so they'll sit and twitter and talk to me, and it is quite nice. Occasionally they'll come in here and fly around, and I have to try and coax them back out again, which is a bit stressful, but we get there in the end. So let me just check. That's me talking. Careful for it doesn't slip off the end. How many I've got there? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 2, 4, 6, 8, 20. 2, 4, 6, 8, 30. 2, 4, 6, 8, 40. 2, 4, 6, 46. So another 14 to go. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so there are all my 60 stitches on my needle there. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is transfer them so that they're on 4 needles, which means 60 divided by 4, that is 15 stitches per needle. Okay, so I am going to slip stitch them. So you always, when you slip stitch, unless it says otherwise, you always slip stitch purlwise. Okay, so you're keeping the stitch the same way around. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay. Okay, so you get that on there, 15. I'm going to pick up my next needle. I'm going to slip those on to the other one. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So that's 3 needles. And the next needle. And they should just stay on, they're not going to fall off. Have confidence in what you're doing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Feel like it's getting close to the edge, which that one probably is. Just slip it down. And you get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And if I've got my counting right, we should have 15 on the last one. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 2, 4, 5. Yeah, brilliant. So we've now got 15 on each needle. Okay, so this is the bit that is the hardest bit. What we need to do is make sure that we're not twisting those around so that they're all sitting level, because what we're going to now do is join that up. So bring your needles round into a loop. Get your end that you're going to knit onto the next one, and just double check that you're not got them. Keep that out of the way. I have to admit that this is like a little bit frustrating, but take your time. There's no hurry, there's no rush. You might as well just keep this slow. So that's up, and that's up. Okay, so I'm going to apologise now for left-hand knitters, because I am right-handed and I'm not quite sure how to sort of demonstrate the left-hand side. But so you want your, what I say, the working yarn end in your right hand, with the needle, with the stitches of the last stitch that you cast on in your right hand, and the other stitch, the first needle that you cast onto in your left hand, and then you've got 2 needles in the middle. Okay, so you're now going to, so we're going to knit the cuff, the top of the the top of the sock. Let me get you a sample. So that bit there, we're going to knit that one, and that's knitted in double rib. Let me just check what I did. I alternate between the two. Sometimes I do double, sometimes I do single, and that's another double rib as well. So for this sock, we're going to knit we'll knit a double rib. Let's do that. Okay. So we're going to do 2 knit, 2 purl. So you put your needle in to knit 2 purl. Make sure that the tail is out your way. So I tuck that behind, and then knit 2 with your 5th needle, which I've just picked up the crochet hook. Your 5th needle. So I'm going to unpick that. I do apologise. So you're not going to put that in there. Well, you can actually. Let's put it in there because it keeps it up, which is also, but also put in your 5th needle, and then make sure that the yarn goes round your 5th needle. Okay, and off. And I've just dropped my needle, which is what happens. I'm going to go back. Take that out, go back. So it is fiddly. You can see it's fiddly. Okay, let's go back. So get that tail out the way. You put your working needle through, and you're going to get your end, and you're going to work that 1st needle. Okay, so that is the hardest bit, I reckon. Take your time, don't forget to breathe, and you will get there. So you'll see we've got your 4 needles and your working needle as well. I'm going to do 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, and on that last and 1 purl. Okay. So what you now need to do, you've come to the end of that 1st needle, is to remember to get that 1st needle and start knitting with it, and we're moving on to the next one. And this, if you've never knitted in the round before, this can be a bit scary, I have to admit. When I first did it, I thought it was never going to hold together. Again, trust in it, okay? So we did 1 purl, so don't forget we've got to do the 2nd of the purl, and you just carry on. So I'm going to go into that 1st stitch on the next needle and purl it. And what I recommend you doing is just make sure that you've got a bit of tension on there, because otherwise a bit of a gap can form. Again, it comes with practice and it will work. So you've got 1 purl, and then we want 2 knit. 1, 2, 2 purl, 1 knit, sorry, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit. So that's 30 stitches done. So that's an even number. So we're going to move on to the third needle now, and again, so our last 2 stitches were knits, so the first 2 stitches are going to be purl. Two purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit. And I have to admit, you know, it is fiddly, this beginning bit, but once you're off and away, it is so easy and lovely. So where we are, I've just done 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, 1 knit, because it's an odd number, it's only 15 stitches on there. So our fourth needle we're going to move on to, you can see that there. We've done 1 knit, so we're going to do 1 more knit. Again, bring it tight, don't forget to move your needle over. 1 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl. Okay, so that's your first row done. So you always know the beginning of your row because you've got your tail. If you want to put a stitch marker there, then you might find that useful, okay? Because that will keep you where you know the beginning of your row is, which is always useful. Make sure that your stitches are not going to drop off, and off we go again. So the second row is much easier than the first row. So again, let's pull in that bit of tension so we don't leave a gap there. And we're starting off with 2 knit, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 1 purl. Don't forget to move your needle along, because it can happen that you forget and you just carry on the same needle. It does happen, it still happens to me, but try and remember to move over so you can keep the right number of stitches on your needle every time. So we did 1 purl there, so our second purl on that, and the uneven, oh sorry, it's not coming round. There we go. So that first, it just went a bit loose on me. So before I move on to the next, I'm just going to tug that in to make sure that I mean, it's not super tight, but just make sure that it's pulled in a little bit as you move on between needles. That one, I'm not sure if you can see it, sorry. I've managed to split the yarn on that one, so I'm actually just going to pull that out and make sure that it goes through properly on the next one. Okay. That's better. Back on. It's a beautiful day out there. It started off quite chilly this morning, but it's absolutely beautiful. I've got one window in the dye studio, and it overlooks a field where there's horses and sometimes some sheep, and I have to count my blessings. I do count my blessings. I feel very privileged. Very, very privileged. And there we are. So second row completed. And it's starting to take shape. So it does get much easier. Once you've gone that far, you're off and away. So let's talk about lengths of cuffs. I actually like a good length of cuff. So this one, I've got to the point now where I actually don't follow the pattern anymore. So I do it all by eye. I'm just going to measure the length of that cuff there, see what I've done on the previous one. So that one is working out at 4.5. And, oh, sorry, and what's that one? So 4. Yeah, so 4.5. I do like a decent cuff on it. Let me just check what the pattern says. Getting in a middle now. Pattern, there's the pattern. Let me just check what the pattern actually says. So the pattern says rib, cuff round, row 16 to 75, or desired length. Sorry, backtrack. So 15 rows, 2 to 15. So yeah, so row 1, then 2 to 15. So that's 15 rows of cuff that you're meant to be doing. And if I count, let me just count that 4 centimetres, how many that actually is. Thereabouts. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, yeah, 15, so that's magical, isn't it? So if that's about 4 centimetres with this wool, gives you 15 rows is 4 centimetres thereabouts. Obviously the other one. For the first sock, it doesn't matter. You can, you can decide as you go along what lengths you want. And obviously when you come to do the second sock in the pair, you just match it up with the first one, which is how I operate. So I'm going to carry on now with that cuff, and I will come back to you when it's done, and we'll move on to the next part of the sock knitting. All right, thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, so I've had a bit of a session knitting and we've got the cuff knitted. I've just measured it and it's 4 centimetres. I'm also finding out what shibori looks like because it's not giving me stripes at all, which I thought it might do, but it's not. It's just got this lovely little fleck of pink coming through, which is quite delightful. So I'm really, really pleased with that. So we are... I've finished my round, so I know I've finished my round because my working yarn and my tail sitting at the same place. So we've come to the end. I actually haven't counted the number of rows. I will just count it up, shall I? Let me just see if I can see them. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yes, so the pattern does say, the free pattern that I will send you if you let me know that you want it, does say 15 rows, and that's what I've done, and it measures about 4 centimetres. So now we're ready for the part of the sock that goes up from the cuff to the start of the heel process, about that bit there. So again, it's up to you what length you do it. I actually quite like a decent length in that sock. Well, that's the one it's nearly finished. So yeah, I actually quite like, so I'm going to measure that. The joy of this yarn is that you've got enough in it to make a decent length, I should say, not lot. Don't know where that came from. Anyway, so let me just measure what I did there. So that's coming out at 18 centimetres for that one there. Where's that one? Okay, this one here, that looks a bit shorter. Let me measure that one. If I'm honest with you, so that's 15 centimetres. Let me read what the pattern says. I think the pattern will be in rows. Working the rib, the cuff. Yeah, so from row 16, because 1 to 15 is your cuff, and row 16 to 75 is going to be your knitting. Now, if 15 rows equals 4 centimetres, then let me just get my head around that. That's 15, that's 60, 75, so that's going to be 15, 30, 30, 45, 60, 5, so that's 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 16, so about 20 centimetres it's telling you on that. I just knit, keep going until I'm happy with how far I get, and as long as the second pair you're matching up with that, then it's fine. Okay, so let me put all this gubbins back away so we're not getting confused. So you finished your cuff, you finished the ribbing, which is knit 2, purl 2, and quite literally you just knit now, which is actually lovely. So instead of ribbing, you just knit. And actually this is where you can speed up as well. So I'm going to ask you to knit from your row 16 to row 75, or however long you want it to be, until the next video session. So that's going to take you down to the start of the heel process, which is there. So from there to there, I want you to carry on knitting now. I'm going to carry on knitting with this, and I will come back to you hopefully tomorrow, depending on how much I get done tonight, to then we will work on that whole heel flap, heel process. Okay, which is great. Lovely. Alrighty, thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying it. Sorry it's a bit fumbly. I'm just feeling my way through these videos. I've got no fancy equipment or anything. I'm literally doing this on the iPad in the dye studio with the sun streaming in to give me light. And hopefully you're finding it useful, if not interesting, and all the rest of it. So again, let me go back to saying that our sock yarn is on sale at the moment. It was £18 for a skein, it is now £15. We are all of it's natural dyed, it's all pure British wool, and also we've got a free there's my crumbly sock pattern that I've used for years and years and years, and I hope to send you a free pattern out on sock knitting. Just email me at emma@inthewoolshed.com and I will get that pattern out to you. Okay, I will come back to you tomorrow. All right, thanks, bye.